In chapter 6, we're going to delve even deeper into the whole issue of the New Testament canon. And one of the more common questions that's asked is, when was the canon closed? In other words, when did we know that we have the 27 and only the 27 books in the New Testament? Well, it really depends upon your definitions. There's one definition of the canon that says, when did all debate end? And that's generally dated in 367 AD. If your definition of the canon is, when did the canon as a group of books start being used as authoritative instruction, that's probably the middle of the 2nd century. But the definition that I like of the canon is, when did the church recognize that certain books were God's books? They spoke with the authority of God. And the argument is that that happened as soon as they were written. When Paul wrote Romans, at that point Romans was in the canon. It was viewed as authoritative by the church. It's really important to understand that the church does not bestow canonicity, because in that case the church is higher than the scripture, but scripture is always higher than the church. And so the church recognizes certain books as having God's authority, but it doesn't impart their authority to the books. So those are one way to answer the question of when was the canon closed. Another question might be, how do we know these things? Well, there are certain canonical lists written throughout the centuries where people list the books that everyone accepts as authoritative, books that are accepted with some question, books that are not accepted at all. We have these canonical lists, and we also have citations by the early church fathers, and the assumption is that they're quoting it, then it is being quoted as an authoritative document. And I have to be careful with these, because I can quote Charles Dickens, and that doesn't make Dickens part of the Bible. Sometimes you quote books that are outside of the Bible, but one thing we look at is who is being cited, what books are being cited by the early fathers. And the other question that is sometimes asked is, well, what if we found another book? Would it be included in the Bible? First of all, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think God, in his control over all things, kept the 27 books that he wanted to be included in the canon. But if we did find another book, I doubt it would be included in the canon, because it would not pass the test of Catholicity. It would not have been used by the church as a whole. It's an interesting question, though, because what we call 1st and 2nd Corinthians, we can tell from how Paul is writing that they're really the 2nd and the 4th times he wrote to the Corinthian church. So what if we found that first, and what if we found that third? Would it be in the canon? Most likely not. It's not going to happen, and they don't pass the test of Catholicity.